that process of letting go took me good 6 months to where I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go and I'm just going to say, that's it, right? I can't continue anymore. And when I did that, and I remember I told my investors, and they were like, oh, cool. Well, you know what? Great job. I mean, you had this tenacity. You did all you could. Like, great job. On to the next. And I was like, huh? Like, you don't, what? Is it that easy? Because, they had seen this so many times. To them, they were like, no, you're good. Like, go start the next company. And also, I do have to say that this is the one thing that I really love about America in general and American mindset. Here, in America, people are okay with failure. I've met so many people that say, "Oh yeah, you know what? I'm on my third startup. Oh yeah, you know what? I had a couple of failed startups, and now I do this." And it's like, "Oh wow, that's cool." And nobody looks down on you. And I come from Finland, where failure is like, "Oh my God, you don't talk about it, and you don't really. That's embarrassing." And even though I've always been like a big risk taker, I think because I've never really failed at anything before, this was super hard. Which is why now, in retrospect, I'm like, I wish I failed more earlier, because it would have probably been way easier to deal with this.
You're listening to Foreign Founders. We tell stories of immigrant and first-gen entrepreneurs, investors, operators, and ecosystem builders. And on the show, you hear incredible stories that often go untold. I'm really excited to have my friend Anna Ratala, two-time founder in tech and media, and most recently the CEO and co-founder of a venture-backed startup, Zvook. Anna was born in Finland. She lived in 3 different continents and now living in New York City, where we both agree that's the greatest city in the world. Welcome to Foreign Founders, Anna.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here, Andy.
Thank you as well. I did a quick intro to your background, but tell us more about you in your own words.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that was a pretty good, short and sweet background. Indeed, I am from Finland. I have not lived there for over 10 years, almost 15 years, actually. I've been living in a bunch of different countries, kind of progressing my career and conquering the world. And before I moved to New York, I lived in Singapore for 8 years. And that's actually also where I got into this startup world. I was running a big tech startup event, got to, work with a lot of founders, investors, the media. We brought them all together for like a big celebration. And that really sparked my, I think, passion truly for wanting to start a startup of my own.
And
when
you can
I did
name
that,
the event as well. It's Slush Singapore, which is like a
correct.
huge banner startup event.
Yeah, it started in Finland. It's a huge event. It's like a 20,000 person event in Finland every single year. It's I think like 15 years running. And we organized a sister event in Southeast Asia, kind of bringing that part of the world together. So that was really, really cool. And then got into a startup accelerator program called Antler by an early stage VC, found my co-founder, found the idea for Zvook, and then realized really that, because we were in podcast advertising, that the market is really in America. And I packed my bags, and literally 2 weeks after we got the first check from Antler, I was on my way on a one-way ticket to New York and haven't looked back since. And that was 6 years ago.
That's amazing. So before we get to Zvook, you went from being in media to throwing huge events, conferences for tech investors, startups, operators in Southeast Asia. And where in this whole world did podcasting really like cross over into your realm?
That's actually a great question. I wasn't even listening to podcasts like during that time when I was running the event. But, effectively when when I joined this startup accelerator program, the whole idea was to go there and test a bunch of different ideas, and actually went into the program with a completely different idea, and then met 3 really good, who then became my really good girlfriends. And we together, the 4 of us, were like, oh my God, we should start a side hustle. We like to drink wine and talk about things, talk about leadership and entrepreneurship and being women in tech and all that stuff. Like, we should start a podcast as a side hustle. So as you do, we booked a weekend trip to Bali to record the podcast.
Oh my
God. I was
Episode
like,
1 was wonderful.
Listen, we actually did record a couple of episodes. They never went live, sadly, which, I mean, I don't know, that might be a good thing because they were pretty unhinged. But I was basically like, listen, we need sponsors. Who would not want to sponsor such great content? Let me go online and just find like a platform that would help us to connect with some sponsors, right? And I
Mhm.
went online and I realized that there are no platforms that will connect brands with potential podcasts. There are tons
Mhm.
of platforms for influencers to connect with brands, but none for podcasts. And I was like, oh my God, this is really interesting. And I started looking more into that. And this was, 2019, kind of early mid 2019, when really this whole podcast boom came about. Spotify started announcing all these acquisitions in podcasting space. They were spending $300 million on new companies. Everybody, all of a
Yeah.
sudden podcasts were so hot and the cool new thing. And
Yeah.
so I just realized that it was a great time to start building something in that space. There was a lot of interest. It was growing really fast, and there was clearly a gap in the market. So that's how Zvook was born. It was a platform for brands to find the most relevant podcasts for host-read ads in just a few clicks instead of back and forth emails and spreadsheets.
Back and forth emails, spreadsheets. I mean, even as marketers, it's like, oh my gosh, this is still the way to do it. I
I know it's a
remember,
pain.
yeah, one of the things I was like very interested in Zvook, and the difference was the host read ads, because I think around that same time too, all the programmatic ads like start becoming all the rage. So, what was that conviction level for you to be like, okay, podcast ads should be host read?
Listen, I agree with you. Like, I've always been such a big believer in anything that is authentic, right? And like when you think about programmatic ads, they are just like any jingle that you hear on radio or on YouTube. You just can't wait to click that skip button. But host
Mhm.
read ads, there's something very authentic about them because it's the host talking about the products and the services, right? And most hosts wouldn't talk about something that they don't believe in. It's sort of like a continuum of influencer marketing. I mean, I think a lot of marketeers have seen this, working with influencers, how really effective that is. And it's no longer about a company making an ad, it's about
Yeah.
working with somebody that can authentically recommend it. And so this was just a continuum of that in podcasts. And I was very, very particular about really wanting to focus on host read ads. I also understood that the reason why such a platform didn't exist is because there's so many more moving bits and pieces when creating a host read ad that it's hard and it's really
Hmm.
complicated. And so I really wanted to tackle that problem. It seemed like a big enough and a challenging enough problem, to tackle. And so, yeah, eventually, I think, what I always used to say is like people don't hate ads, they just hate bad ads and poorly targeted ads. And we
Yep.
wanted to help, brands create authentic, good ads in collaboration with the podcast host.
Yeah, I remember when we first met. We actually that was a funny story too, because at that time I was building a podcast company too, a product as
Yes.
well. And I think you were walking to the elevator of like a co-working space I was in, and I was like talking to someone else, and they're like, "Oh, that founder who's building like podcast stuff is just going to the elevator," and like run over to say hi. So that's how
I
we met.
know.
It
I
was
think it was
basically in that
actually at
space.
Antlers co-working space.
Yeah, in New
So
York,
yeah. Yes, in
right?
New York, correct.
Yes. So what? One of those things where you said it was really difficult for host-read ads to get executed on. Like, what are some difficulties in general?
Well, just scaling is
Hmm.
the biggest challenge, right? Because if you are a brand and you say, hey, you know what, I'm making toothpaste and I want everybody to know about my toothpaste. If you want the host to read your ad, you have to actually reach out to all these hosts and they have to individually, like if you want to be on 100 podcasts, 100 different hosts have to read your
Yeah.
ad. They have to create the ad copy. Some of them are going to say, hey, can I change this ad copy? Do I have to read it verbatim? Hey, this is how we usually do the ad reads. Can you send me the toothpaste? I want to try it first, right? Most of them want to try the product first. So there's so many moving bits and pieces, which is why it's not just recording an ad and clicking button and that ad now being distributed to thousands of podcasts. That's not how host read ads work, which
Hmm.
is also why they are so effective, but it does take more time. And so it's way more work for companies to try to kind of navigate those logistics. But even, just finding the most relevant podcast, because it's, again, with programmatic, you sort of say, yeah, you know what, anybody whose listeners are 25 to 45-year-old women living in New York, but you know what, we can be very, very different in
Yeah.
what we like. I mean, now obviously the programmatic capabilities have developed a little bit, but especially back then, like, it was just very kind of basic level, versus with
Yeah.
host, right? You really want to find the alignment authentically with the content. So you have to do a little more research. And like, how do you do that research? How many podcasts do you have to reach out to? How many podcast networks do you have to reach out to? And so we built a platform that actually had a very early AI component. I mean, again, nothing compared to what AI is today, even, which is crazy because it was only 6 years ago we started,
Right.
and it's just changed so much. But back then, like, it was just kind of basic level, but still would allow you to find shows that align with your brand content wise. And
Mm-hmm.
so, we believe that, better kind of match when it comes to content would yield better results also,
Mm-hmm.
which was true.
Yeah. And then for you, what was like really fascinating, which I love too, was you were also creating a lot of content yourself, right?
Yes.
Including what I really enjoyed was Found Her, the
Oh,
founder
thank
stories,
you.
the basically like the audio version of your diary, essentially.
Yes.
Maybe what's helpful for audiences on the show is like, how should founders be using the medium, the podcast medium? And why did you end up doing those like podcasting for yourself?
Yeah, I think telling your story and your thoughts in your own voice, you cannot have anything more real than that. Like, even us writing something on LinkedIn, it's like written words, right? And somebody
Yeah.
sees it on a screen when they scroll, maybe for like, half a second. But when somebody chooses to press play and listen to your little snippet, it's them listening to your voice. You're in their heads or in their ears, and you're authentically talking about it. And I felt like it was way easier to talk in a way more relaxed way. Like, when you write on LinkedIn, you don't write like, and you don't say, "Oh, damn, that sucked." Like, that's just not the language you use. But when you're
Yeah.
doing that on a podcast, you can do that. You can say, you can be yourself, right?
Yeah.
Maybe people can even hear a little bit of the background or whatever. Oh yeah, you know what? I was staying for part of the time that I was recording. I was staying with my parents in Spain. I'm like, oh, that's our dog, barking there in the background.
Right.
So it kind of creates a way more real way, I think, to connect with people. And
Yeah.
I
It's
I think
less
what's really,
edited.
yes, it's less edit. Well, unless you edit it, but I really recommend not to over edit it, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants a scripted story. People just want, I think, conversations on the go. And I think
Hmm.
if you're a founder that likes to talk, and again, this is not for everybody, but if you're a founder who likes to talk and you're a
Hmm.
storyteller, then it's an
Right.
amazing way to tell those stories. And for me, like, I really wanted to share kind of every day. I didn't record every day, but let's say weekly, right? I wanted to
Yeah.
just share what's up, like, how am I feeling, what am I up to as a founder, what kind of conversations. I actually had some conversations with investors that I shared on the pod, and they got back to me. I mean, I wasn't saying any names, but
Yeah.
it actually progressed a case that I was having with an investor, which was really funny because I think that they saw me post about it, and they got back to me and they were like, yeah. So there are benefits to that, but I also
Yeah.
think that the big benefit is for people to really get to know you, because it is so true that people buy people, right? Investors invest in people, and
Hmm.
customers buy from people. And putting yourself out there and being authentically yourself, I think, truly helps people to kind of understand what you represent, and get excited about your products. And I mean, I also posted a lot on LinkedIn and sharing my like founder stories and the struggles and whatnot, and we got so many leads just from
Hmm.
that. Like, I wasn't talking about podcast advertising on my LinkedIn. I was talking about me being a founder and what that meant, and what my thoughts around that were. But through that, people were like, "Oh, what is this Zvook? What is this funny sounding company that you run? Like, what do you guys? Oh, podcast. Oh, I love it. We
Yeah.
should talk." So yeah, that
Interesting.
worked really well for me as like um, a marketing channel.
Yeah, as a marketing channel, it was like being able to a lot of the world today, like even when you were at the New York Tech Week event that we co-hosted at Foreign Founders, it's I think we're just in a world where you have to tell your own story. Like if you're not
Yeah.
telling your own story, then either someone else is in a way that you don't want to, or it's just not getting told at all. So I think it's,
Yeah,
whatever medium it is, it's like now you have all kinds of power to basically create your own story. Like maybe in the
I
beginning,
agree.
yeah, people are not looking, but then over months, years, like people are paying attention. So
And consistency really is such a key. I mean, nobody, like, we always like to think, like, oh my God, we're like overthinking that first post or that first episode. And it's like, what are people going to say? And nobody even
yeah,
listens to it, right? Like, they're
yeah,
saying nothing because they don't care. But if you do that every day or every week consistently for a year, people are going to pay attention. And there's going to be one of those episodes that is going to resonate, right? Not every single one, but there's going to be the one that's going to be like, oh,
100%.
that was the one. And this is how it led to XYZ. But
Yeah.
I will say also this, right? Right now, I feel like authenticity is such a hot word. Everybody's like, you're
Yeah.
gonna be authentically yourself. Like, go cry on Instagram. Like, that's authentic.
Yeah.
And I'm like, let's not overdo it, right? Like,
Yeah.
let's not. I don't know if that's authentic. Like, do you authentically cry and want to like pull up a phone and be like, let me
Yeah.
record
Yeah.
this, right?
Just
It's a tough
video.
day. Like, don't bullshit people because I think that people also see through that. But
Yeah.
go out there and just be yourself, basically. Don't script, don't overthink, and don't tie everything back to your own business. You don't have to. Just
Hmm.
talk about your experience being a founder. And I think that's one of the things that all non-founders don't have, right? If you're a marketeer but you're not a founder, you
Hmm.
don't have that angle. So if you are a founder, use that to your advantage.
So are you going to pick up podcasting again or like creating your own content? It's been a
I
while.
would love to. It's been a while. I've been on a bit of a hiatus
Yeah.
because, my own status as a founder has since changed. And as I've kind of, I walked away from the startup and, have spent some time figuring out what I want next. And now I have that next step. And so I might start something. I mean, I would love to talk. You know what I mean? Like, I love talking. So,
That's easy to do.
yes.
Let's talk about that part, the transition part. So you were running Zvook. You're a founder for more than 8 years. You're running Zvook for majority of that time.
Yes.
What were the last couple of years of Zvook like? What do you go through? Yeah,
Fucking hard.
yeah.
Like, really, really hard. And honestly, the last year specifically, so we were kind of starting to understand that we don't really have a true product market fit. We wanted to build a platform where people would go and we would automate a lot of things, but that's not how majority of advertisers were willing to part with their thousands and tens of thousands of their dollars by just
Mhm.
clicking buttons, right? They didn't feel comfortable. So we still had like a team that did a lot of those operations. And so effectively, we were sort of between an agency and a tech company, but I really wanted us to be the tech company. So we kind of really tried to figure out that component. And we did pivot eventually, but it was a little bit too late. We ran out of money. It was really hard to raise any new money. And when we did the pivot, we signed some pretty cool big podcast networks to kind of, help us get into the right direction, but they couldn't
Mhm.
pay us because we had to, change the product a little bit for them to be able to use it. And we couldn't change the product because we didn't have the money to pay the tech. And so it was this loop. And I spent, I don't know, probably 10 months like of the last year of Zvook just trying to get money and try to get funding. And, I would
Mhm.
speak with investors and I got a couple of verbals that got my hopes up and then they kind of fell through. And I remember it was like my birthday was August. It was in August 2023. And I'd been like at this for a while. I hadn't paid myself in months. And I was like, what am I doing? It was my birthday. And I was like, what am I doing? Like, what? This is not life. Like, I've been at this for what, like 5 years, 4.5 years at that point. And I'm like,
Mhm.
maybe that was the first time I started feeling like maybe this isn't going anywhere. And, I think every founder knows, like, I think a lot of people ask this question, like, well, how do you know if you should just push a little bit or if you should continue? And I had asked that question myself too. I'm like, what? But do you know in your gut, like, if you have it in you wake up and you're like, no, I'm going to make this happen. Let's do it, then sure, if you have an opportunity, go for it. But the second you start feeling, and that was the time for me when I was like, I don't know if this is going, I don't like this anymore. I wake up, I'm not
Mhm.
excited anymore. And it's not because of it's hard to fundraise or whatever. It's just, I feel like something just isn't really moving along. And that was a really, really, really hard time for me to admit, because
Hmm.
up until that point, I'd never failed at anything in my life. Nothing. Like nothing. I was always like this overachiever, this
Yeah,
person who
you
was
keep
like,
going.
keep
Right.
going, and whatever I set my mind to, I can achieve. And it's just all about working hard and all that stuff. And I still wholeheartedly like believe in it, but it was really, really hard for me to acknowledge that, well, this wasn't going to be this huge success that I thought. And I think when I started Zvook, it wasn't just like, hey, let's see where this goes. It's like, I'm going to make this the big, amazing startup and the big success and all these things, right? And I feel like I had wrapped my whole identity around that, right? I was a founder first and
Hmm.
everything else second. And so now being like, oh, hang on, what? Maybe I'm going to, what? This isn't working out. And so it took me, I feel like that process of letting go took me like good 6 months to where I
Yeah.
was like, you know what? I'm just gonna go and I'm just gonna say, that's it, right? I can't continue anymore. And
Yeah.
when I did that, and I remember I told my investors, and they were like, oh, cool. Well, you know what? Great job. I mean, you had the tenacity, you did all you could, like, great job, on to the next. And I was like, huh? Like, you're
Yeah.
what? Is it that
Did
easy?
you
Because,
did you
they had
you
seen
didn't
this so
expect
many
that at
times.
all, right?
Well, no, I feel like, I don't know, maybe I felt like I was like embarrassed, or like I like failed, and they would be like, oh, like, well, what can you do, but like this sucks,
Yeah.
type of thing. And they were like, oh no, it's like, this happens. Like, this is, I mean, they have seen this happen. Right? To me, this was the first time. To them,
Hmm.
they were like, no, you're good. Like, go start the next company. And
Hmm.
also, I do have to say that this is the one thing that I really love about America in general, and American mindset, is that here in America, people are okay with failure. I've met so many people that say, "Oh yeah, you know what? I'm on my third startup. Oh yeah, you know what? I had a couple of failed startups, and now I do this." And it's like, "Oh wow, that's cool." And nobody looks down
Hmm.
on you. And I come from Finland, where failure is like, "Oh my god, you don't talk about it, and
Yeah.
you don't really. That's embarrassing." And even though I've always been like a big risk taker, I think because I've never really failed at anything before, this was super hard. Which is why now, in retrospect, I'm like, I wish I failed more earlier, because it would have probably been way easier to deal with this. But no, it helped a lot, just talking to my investors, and just like, I started like reaching out to some of my network, and I was like, oh yeah, thinking of like wrapping things up, and everybody was like, oh, that's cool. So what are you gonna do next? Like, nobody obviously cared that this wasn't gonna be the huge success. They were just like curious about, what are you gonna do next, and some people asked why, and it's fair, and I explained, and they were like, yeah, that's cool. Like, you
Yeah.
did well. And I mean,
Like I'm expecting a reaction.
yeah, exactly. I thought that was, obviously, to me, I think it was like
Yeah.
such a big thing, and to everybody else, like, it was like, yeah. Um, so yeah, so then after that, I talked to a few. Actually, I was really happy about the fact that so many companies in our industry, podcasting, podcast advertising, so many bigger companies wanted to talk to us, because I obviously
Hmm.
wanted to see if we could sell it. But truthfully, we were a little bit too late for that. Had I done that earlier, and had I not postponed it,
Hmm.
so had it not been so hard for me to let go, would have had those
Yeah.
conversations earlier, and I think we may have, you know, had a chance to maybe sell it for, not a lot of money, but for something. And so eventually I just had to make the decision to, close it down. And then, like, what am I going to do then? Right? My whole
Hmm.
identity is, I'm a founder. And like I said, like, my podcast was about being a founder. My LinkedIn post, everything, like, that's who
Yeah.
I was. That was such a big part of me. And so I was like, what the hell am I going to do? So I went to live with my parents for a few months. They live in Spain, and I spent a few months there, just to, kind of
They don't
decompressing a
live
little bit.
anywhere in Spain. They live in a beautiful beach town,
Yes,
right?
they do. And I did a little bit of, I worked on a few little projects, just to kind of, get some income, and try to figure out what I want to do next. And I think during that time, I think for me, I somehow mentally let go of this idea that, you know, that I only could be a founder, right?
Hmm.
Because I'd also, everybody who's especially early stage founder knows that, you always have this uncertainty and stress. And, this, we talk about this with you all the time, like how stressful it is. And you don't know if the paycheck is coming. And sometimes it's not coming. And this
Yeah.
whole thing. And I'd been under that stress for so long, for many years, plus doing that in a foreign country, right? With visas, with all that. And so I felt like I needed a break from that. Like I did not want to go and start like something new. First of all, I wasn't financially in a position to do that and to sustain
Hmm.
myself while like, building something new. But also just mentally, I was honestly really tired. And I don't think that I would have been able to. I think that starting something new right away, at least for me, would have just been like trying to make up for the failure in a way. Like be like, no, no,
Hmm.
but I can make something successful. And that's a wrong reason to start anything, right? And so I started being like, you know what, maybe I should just join a company, look for a job, join a company, do something.
Hmm.
And for the first time in like, I don't know, 10 years, I was like, where's my CV? Like, should I start like looking for opportunities? And I admittedly, I do have to say that in the beginning, I was just very reluctant to do that. And I'm like, yeah, I should probably look for something, but I don't know, is this really what I want to do? And how am I gonna, I'm gonna have a boss and somebody's gonna tell me what to do and all that stuff, right? But then later, I think as I started speaking with different companies, and then I spoke with a company that I actually now recently joined, that's in podcast advertising, and they actually used to be our competitor. They were our
Hmm.
closest competitor, and but way further along than us. They
Yeah.
had raised more money. They had like a really amazing team, and I'd never spoken to them before. And so I got to talking to their both of their founders. They're great guys, really amazing vision. They have great culture, and it almost felt like a continuum of Zvook in a
Yeah.
way. And
Did you just
so
cold email them?
no, we actually had spoken earlier, about a year prior, when I was trying to sell Zvook, and
Okay.
they were one of the people that wanted to talk. And they were like,
Yeah.
"Listen, you guys have done a great job. We've like kept an eye on you, and that all of that like felt really good." I'm like, "Oh, somebody knows who we were." And they were like, "Well, we don't really." I mean, they were so far. Like, their platform is so much more developed than ours was. So they were like, "Well, tech wise, there isn't really anything that we can do." But they're like, "We really like you, and like let's keep in touch, and we might have something for you." And I was like, "I'm not gonna work in podcasting anymore. I'm leaving podcasting, right?"
Hmm.
And in reality, I think I just needed a little break. And I
Hmm.
reconnected with them earlier this year, and we just had such a great conversations. And I was like, you know what? I think I've had enough of a break, and I'm still really excited about the podcasting as an industry. I'm still really excited about this vision of helping brands scale host read ads,
Right.
and that's exactly what Red Circle, the company that I'm with right now, is doing. And so they had a role available to run marketing, and I was like, you know what, I'm up for it.
So do you think that was the way to get into your post founder job? Like what are some of the suggestions that you have for people who might be listening and like thinking about that? Being like, oh, how do I A, detach from that identity, and B, how do I actually have the right role that like fits into another company's like org structure?
Yeah, I think first of all, if you have an opportunity, which I know not
Yeah.
everybody has, but if you have an opportunity, have a break, right? Go live with your parents. Like I lived with my parents for 5 months, right? Like I
Yeah.
needed that break, right? I have other founder friends that are now doing the same when they're kind of detaching themselves. They go back, live with their, parents or their families and just kind of, detach, because I think that's really, really important. And then after that, I mean, if you are really passionate about the industry that you're in, I would say that's the first place to start, is your own industry. And
Hmm.
thinking about, I mean, had you told me a year ago, like, oh, you can always go work for your competitor, I would have been like, what? No, I would,
Yeah.
wow, how, what does that mean? Like, I used to be a CEO, and now I'm like, now I have a boss and it's my competitor. Like, what? That felt so weird. But
Right.
again, there are probably several players in your industry, and just find the one with a great culture, with great people, right? That are
Hmm.
going to respect your experience and what you know about the industry. And I think, I mean, one of the reasons why I'm sure that I got hired is just me understanding and having my finger on the pulse of what's happening with the industry, because I've built a business in this industry. So it's like a
Hmm.
huge resource. Um, and then, yeah, I think like just being really open. And this was like a really hard part for me as well. It's just understanding that, just because you're not a founder or CEO, you can still have so much ownership and you can still make a very big difference in another company that you really really believe in.
Yeah.
I think now I am really seeing in the most positive way what that means, and I feel like I do have the ownership and I do have a say, and whatever I'm doing can actually really impact where this company goes, and
Hmm.
how customers see us and how podcasters see us and all of that. So I think it is really finding like that right role, but I think you have to leave a little bit of your ego kind of at the door. And I know that it's really hard for a lot of founders. There's a reason why we're founders, right?
Because they're
Like we
so
have
A-type, right? And
yes,
chip on their
yes.
shoulders.
Like you have to, because otherwise you wouldn't start a business. And you
Yeah.
have to have a little bit of maybe, kind of that pride and ambition and determination and all of those
Yeah.
like type A qualities. But you
Right.
do have to leave that ego kind of behind.
Hmm.
Because obviously if you don't, then either you're not going to get hired or you're going to get fired very quickly. And
Yeah.
as we all founders know, it's like hire slow but fire fast. So
Yeah.
your ass is going to be on the
Yeah.
line if you um but having said that, like I do have to say, like in retrospect, it's also so easy to be like, oh yeah, do this, do that. But it was a really challenging period, I
Hmm.
think, for anybody going through it. And I felt like even after the 5 months that I spent in Spain and got back to New York, I was like, oh my God, like I don't know if I'm still like, oh yes, like I'm reborn. Like I still kind of was a little bit like trying to figure out where do I fit. So it does take a little bit of time, and I think it's okay. I don't think that people talk about that enough, really. What happens when your startup, doesn't work out and you go and you do something else, either
Hmm.
for good or just for the time being.
Yeah.
Still, that transition isn't really talked about. I mean, I guess it's not cool to talk about that, but
No.
um
It's
but it's
not
a really
glamorous. It's painful.
no.
Like you have to do a lot of reflection, like you've done,
Yes.
you know, it's not
Yeah.
easy. Yeah.
And that reflection is honestly, like, yeah, I just like you said, it's kind of painful, and then you have to be like, some things I kind of like, I made some mistakes, and like this thing I would do differently. But you can't obviously live in regret, but just like taking learnings and reflecting, I think, is super important.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that because, like you said, not many people talk about it, and that's the reason why I wanted you on the show to talk about these things from your perspective as an immigrant founder, and then what next. So I'm really excited for like what's the next chapter for you. Can you tell a little bit about what do you do for Red Circle, and
Yes.
what do you want to accomplish there?
Yeah, so I'm a marketing director. I run the marketing operations for Red Circle, and like I said, we're a podcast advertising platform that
Hmm.
just streamlines the whole process for brands and for the podcasters, and we help brands to scale host read ads across hundreds of podcasts. And my job is obviously, as the marketeer, to get more companies to know about Red Circle and
Yeah.
to come to us and do podcast advertising through us. We're a relatively unknown company outside of the podcasting industry. In the
Hmm.
podcasting space, people know us, but outside, not so much. And to be fair, I don't think that a lot of companies know podcast advertising, companies in general, right? Like
Right.
if you were a brand and you wanted to decide where you want to go and who you want to help you with podcast advertising, I don't think you would know.
Yeah.
And so my job is to put our name on the map.
Yeah. What are some of the brands that you guys work with?
We work with tons of really, really cool brands. We just recently, for example, started working with a cool brand called Mood. They're on like CBD space. We work with, brands like Happy Mama. They're in wellness space. We work with Recess. We work with Wonderful Pistachios. You guys probably seen
Oh,
the
yes.
pistachios. Just tons of really, really cool, exciting brands
Yeah.
that just want to be, collaborating with audio influencers.
You think CPG and DTC brands are actually like the best customers for podcasting ads? Like, How do you think about that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
D2C,
interesting.
e-commerce brands, anybody who kind of ships directly to the clients, because you're talking directly to the customers, right?
Yeah.
And the customers take their recommendations from the hosts that they trust. And podcasts are the fastest growing advertising channel currently. It grows faster than any other digital advertising channel.
Mm.
Social media is super, super crowded right now. Like, and again, when you think about it, when you see even an influencer talk, like I could be, advertising wonderful pistachios on my like Insta story, but you can just swipe it in 2 seconds and it's done
Yeah.
and you don't hear it anymore. But if you choose to listen to my podcast, you are going to listen to me talk about them, right? So
Yeah.
you're way more engaged. So it's definitely a really, really good avenue.
Interesting. I've definitely heard a lot more smaller brands really think about how to engage with podcast advertising too.
Yeah.
Last couple questions. So the first thing is on your profile, it says you're a foodie and you live in New York City. Top restaurant off the
Oh
top
my
of your
God.
head.
You know what? I love a restaurant called Antica Pesa. It's an
Mhm.
Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, and
Nice.
their original one is in Rome. And it's, I think, the son or the uncle or the nephew or somebody who started it in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
Amazing Italian food, amazing atmosphere, and great service.
Okay. I need to go.
Yes,
Second thing. So you are a self-described champagne lover. Again, on your profile, describe
yes.
that perfect moment for a glass of champagne.
Oh my God. It's like the best thing you can do with clothes on. Literally, just having that first sip of champagne, just, oh, love it.
The last thing I always ask this to all the founders on the show: what are you optimistic about?
The future, just in general. I think in recent times, people have been less optimistic about the future for various reasons, right? A lot of things are happening in the world and so on. But I've always been a very positive person. I've always been very optimistic about the future, and I am optimistic about it right now. I think a lot of what we are seeing and how we are dealing with things has to do with our approach and our attitude, right?
Right.
And so if you have a mindset that sees opportunities, you're going to see opportunities, and if you have a mindset that sees, challenges, then you're going to see problems and obstacles. And so I'm definitely in the camp of seeing opportunities, and so I am just excited to kind of see what the future brings. I am excited and positive about even AI and all these opportunities there. So yeah, I think that we're going to have a really interesting, fun, exciting few years to come in the near future. And yeah.
That's the perfect way to end the show. Thank you, Anna. If you want to go, if people want to reach out to you or, ask you questions, where do you want to direct them?
So either LinkedIn or
Yeah,
Instagram, I'm active on both, and you can just find me there with my name, Anna Ratala.
perfect. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks so much, Andy.